Welcome back to Just the Truth, and I'm continuing the conversation with my good friend Eric Metaxas, the author of the brand new book, Fish Out of Water, but also read his prior books. His book on Bonhoeffer is amazing, and also If You Can Keep It happens to be my favorite, of course, because it's all about the American founding principles. And Eric, one of those founding principles is religious liberty, and that has been tried and tested in America over this past year, especially in California. And we have some good news today with our friends at Liberty Counsel, who actually apparently obtained a settlement that will result in a statewide permanent injunction against Gavin Newsom and the state of California from enforcing these unreasonable and arbitrary COVID restrictions against churches. I mean, I know from defending Pastor John MacArthur and other churches through the Thomas More Society in California, this has just been an absolute intentionally discriminatory action against churches by Gavin Newsom and his office. So this is a great win.
Well, before I go into that, I just a corollary, which comes, it's the same idea, is that notice that those of us who believe in God believe in religious liberty, right? So Israel, in their laws, they will protect Muslims. They will protect atheists. They don't say, if you're not a Jew, if you're not a faithful Jew, we're not going to protect you. No, there's out of their biblical faith comes the idea of respect for people with whom they differ. That idea is unique to the West. Let's be honest, we've got that in America. So out of faith, you get respect for people who have no faith. That's the conundrum, and that's the beauty of real liberty. So if you want to know who the good guys are, you know, that tells you something.
And that's that is a reflection of biblical truth, that God does not force and compel us to believe in him. He calls us and stirs our heart, and we are all searching for the truth, and we all have to answer life's most important question, which is, who do we say that the true God is? But how we answer that question, how we go about discovering that, should not be state compelled. Absolutely. It should not at all ever be in the province of the state to say mandatorily, because you live in X state or X country, you have to identify with this particular religion. That's the essence of religious liberty.
And the flip side of that, of course, is where we are in places like California or New York, when you have the government trying to enforce a secular view. It's no different than forcing Sharia law or forcing Christian law. The fact of the matter is that if you don't understand church, the separation of church and state, if you don't understand religious liberty, you can get this wrong going in any direction. And so when you have folks like Gavin Newsom overreaching and trying to say, we're not going to give you respect in the churches, we're going to treat you poorly, we're going to even act with a secular animus against religion, if you don't push back, you deserve what you get. In California, they pushed back vigorously. We need to do that on every issue in every state in the union. If you do not push back against government bullying, you deserve to be bullied. We have to protect our freedoms by living them out. And first of all, I applaud the pastors that I know. There have been heroic, Che Ahn and Jack Hibbs, and Pastor Rob McCoy. They have really stuck their necks out there, but we all benefit because they've been really brave. But the rest of us have to be brave too. When somebody tells you can't talk about the vaccine, make sure you talk about it. When they say you can't talk about election fraud, make sure you talk about it. Do not let people tell you what you can say or can't say. That's not the American way. If we don't understand it and live it out, we will suffer and we'll lose the liberties we have.
Oh, so well said. And that's why I'm so grateful, Eric, that you stand up boldly and you are a leader in this, because you will never shrink back from talking about the truth, from bringing people on your show, from coming on shows like mine to say we have to talk about truth, because if we're unwilling to have the conversations, then how will we ever inform each other and discover together the truth? And that's what the whole understanding of a legitimate form of government is. Of course, as we've talked about, we have to stay within principled parameters. The essence of freedom and liberty is not just the license to do whatever you want, and that the government is only there to arbitrate contract disputes. That's not a legitimate form of government, because even the leftists know that a moral ethic is ingrained in our very DNA, because we are human beings made in the image of God. And so we understand that there is a measurable difference between right and wrong and good and evil. We all know that. And so we have to have the principle rules and we have to have the guardrails up to say that things like murder and rape and abortion are wrong. We have to make sure that that's part of our government process. But on the flip side, we have to recognize that genuine freedom and liberty means that how you run your family, how I run my family, what we say we believe in terms of truth and free exercise of religion is going to vary. And that's where, as Christians, what our responsibility is to exercise that freedom by speaking up in the public square, by telling people, I want to share my faith with you because I have the liberty and freedom to tell you about the truth, to have these conversations. Because guess what? We're so privileged to live in America because our government doesn't compel us to prefer one religion over the other or compel us to shut up about the truth. That's the essence of freedom and liberty.
Amen. And I just want to say that, again, Americans, you must speak up. Don't be shy. When I see people wearing masks, walking down the street in New York City, which most people do, I just think this is amazing. There's no scientific reason for wearing the mask. It's utterly preposterous. There's no scientific reason for getting the vaccine. You're free to get it, but there are so many questions. The idea that everybody should get the vaccine. No, a lot of people have suffered from getting the vaccine. A lot of people have gotten the vaccine and then they get COVID anyway. There's all kinds of questions. We need to have an open and free society. Discuss the science. Don't be afraid. Don't knuckle under to any narrative that anybody's trying to push on you. Folks, it happened in Germany. You can read the story of Bonhoeffer. We will go down the same path unless we act differently. We have no excuse. We have the story of Bonhoeffer as a warning, but we also have traditions in America. We're supposed to know what it is to be free. We have separation of church and state. But now's the time, it's a good learning time for Americans to see, do we really know this? Do we need to get a refresher on these things? Because if we don't, we will go the way of all flesh. The liberty will not last.
Absolutely. And I love that you invoke the term separation of church and state because so many leftists and even Christians and conservatives misunderstand that term. The term separation of church and state, as the leftists would like to frame it, and of course, they're master manipulators of linguistics, and they want to harness that term, and they want to push out a completely false narrative to say that that means that God has no involvement in society or in our government. That is a false definition of separation of church and state. What you just said,
putting it
Eric,
kindly. It's a filthy lie. It is really a vile, vile, despicable lie. And everyone needs to understand what the founders meant by separation of church and state, religious liberty. It means we are to protect churches and people of faith from government intrusion. The government has no right to even have a loud opinion on this. They have to really keep their noses out of it, let the people be free, let the people decide for themselves. If you can't do that, you're not in line with the Constitution.
Absolutely, and that goes for the province of the church, it goes for parental rights, the province of the family, it goes for things like the freedom to choose to take the vaccine or not. You have to analyze all of the factors. There are a lot of legitimate arguments on both sides, and for the people who say, well, you are selfish if you don't take the vaccine, you have no idea a lot of the contemplations that the individual will decide for themselves. This is why we have freedom, but it has to be a legitimate choice. It's not my body, my choice when it comes to the intentional killing of an unborn human child. It's not your body, therefore it's not your choice. So we have to stay within those moral parameters. And that's why it's so important to parse the difference between right and wrong, and that's why we will be right back with more on Just the Truth.